All right. Hey there, folks. Even with live conventions, readings, and other live events getting back on track, I figured I would keep bringing book tour to you. So, welcome to Russ's Rockin' Rollercoaster, intriguing interviews with creative minds. So, over the last few years, one of the best sci-fi TV shows ever, in my opinion, has reached the airways, a combination of alternate history and sci-fi thriller. Tonight, we'll be talking not just for ourselves, but of course, for all mankind. On our panel today is my pal, musician, and recently retired astrophysicist, Alan Smale. Alan is also the award-winning author of Alternate and Twisted History and Hard Science Fiction. Welcome back, Alan.
Great to be back again. Thanks for having me.
All right. Also on our panel is my pal, JL Gribble. JL writes speculative fiction and romance and is an all-around sci-fi fan. Welcome back, JL.
Hello.
All right. And rounding out our panel is my pal, Randee Dawn. Randee is an entertainment journalist who writes for the LA Times, Variety, Today.com, and many other publications, and is the author of the Amazon best-selling funny, fantastical pop culture novel Tune In Tomorrow, which was a finalist in the 2023 Next Generation Indie Awards. Welcome back, Randee.
Thanks for having me.
All right, just a heads up to the folks at home. Feel free to send any notes or questions you have for the panel in the chat box during the show, and we'll get to a few at the end. Okay, so just to frame up For All Mankind, which just wrapped its 4th season, in this alternate version of our history, the Russians beat the Americans to the moon, which changed the trajectory of the space program, politics, and the various players involved. Now, before we dive into For All Mankind, I want to take a step back for a minute, and let's just talk about alternate history as a genre. So my question for you guys is, what is it about positing these other versions of our reality that we find so fascinating? Is it wish fulfillment? Is it a desire to feel like we can control the outcomes? Is it something else? Or is it simply just a fun experience to posit what if? All right, Alan, I'll start with you.
Okay, well, certainly in some cases there may be an element of wish fulfillment or an element of looking at how things could be even worse than they have been now. I think alternate history is fascinating in many ways because when you're telling an alternate history story or reading an alternate history story, you also have the resonances of knowing the real history and what happened in our timeline, and that can cast the whole thing into a completely different role. So it adds a depth that other kinds of fiction don't have. I think we all practice alternate history ourselves every day anyway. We're always thinking, what would have happened if I'd made this decision or that decision differently? I often think about how my own position now, both in the writing world and in my career, could have been very different if I'd made very small decisions. And so, differently, if I'd done things differently when I was in my 20s or 30s, I'd probably have had a completely different life. And I'm sure those kinds of thoughts have occurred to a lot of people. So I think alternate history is that writ large in a way. I think it is. It's kind of fascinating to look at history in a new light and see how history works. And I think it's fun to look at other possibilities.
Right. I think you're spot on in that, probably how many times a day do any of us just think, if I would have zigged instead of zagged, or made the left turn instead of the right turn, or said yes or instead of no, or no instead of yes, what would and knock down those dominoes, like what would have happened? So interesting. All right, JL, what about you?
Yeah, in another universe, I'm an NSA agent, and that is both hilarious and terrifying to consider.
Cool.
Because they tried to recruit me out of college, and I was like, no, I'm going to go write fantasy novels instead, and I did. But I do a like kind of academic world building presentation on alternate history at conventions. So if you're ever at a con that I'm at that I do that, please come by. Because I kind of present alternate history as almost a storytelling method that can be applied to pretty much any genre, not just speculative fiction. And because it is the ultimate what if, which when it comes to alternate history is not necessarily limited just to like sci-fi or fantasy. As you can see, like there has not been there's been some like extrapolation, but otherwise, For All Mankind is a very solidly rooted science story that just is completely different based on a few changes that kind of just end up going off the rails as the seasons continue.
Randee, what about you? What's the appeal to you about, alternate history?
I like the idea of wish fulfillment because it lets us explore how things might have been different. But reflecting off of something that Alan said, which is, what if I had made a tiny difference in my own life and that kind of thing? I think what's interesting about a lot of the alternative history that's out there, especially with All Mankind, For All Mankind, is the changes, the key change that is made in the very first season.
Well, don't get into that. Don't get into that right now.
I'm just saying, sometimes those decisions are not in our hands to make. So I think what's interesting is the idea that, if we think that all of the decisions in our life are things that we can control, that's one way of looking at it. But I think it's interesting to also consider that you can have lived your life exactly the way it was supposed to have been, but outside forces have made the history different. So that's interesting to me. I mean, I think we can only make the decisions we want to make with the information we have at the time, ideally. So the idea of it being something you don't regret is another story, but I like the idea as with this show, that things happen outside that then change our whole psychology in a lot of ways.
Well, we're going to poke around at that a little bit later in the show, so we'll see. All right, so season 1 of For All Mankind was essentially an alternate reality, an alternate history TV version of The Right Stuff. What worked for me so well was that it was all felt so grounded and real. So talk to me about the use of science, technology, and mathematics as it was understood among the players involved at the time, and how or if that helped lay the foundation for the entire series. So JL, why don't we start with you?
I liked your analogy of comparing it to The Right Stuff, because I'm not gonna lie, like my husband and I saw alternate history, early space race, and then I went, oh, and that's Joel Kinnaman. Yeah, we can totally watch this. And I liked that it was so rooted in science and technology. But after the first few episodes, episode or two, I was like, oh, okay, so it's another early space race show featuring a bunch of white dudes. And then they kept the science and everything the same. And then all of a sudden it becomes like this incredibly women, POC queer show, still starring Joel Kinnaman, but
Well, we're going to talk a lot about that.
Yeah.
That's coming.
Yeah, but in terms of at least the first season, I think they did a good job of hooking us all in before it gets a little too crazy.
Okay, so Alan, so you're the science guy among us here. So what did you think about how they laid the foundation early on to set this, mathematically, scientifically, to set the stage going forward? Did you feel that they did a good job? Did it seem real, or were they kind of, or were they getting fuzzy right off the bat? What do you think?
I don't think they were getting fuzzy off the bat. They got fuzzy later on, and we can get to that. But I think originally they actually stuck really closely to the technologies that were available at the time, the realities of physics and orbital mechanics, all of these things that were going on in the show. It felt very real in the sense that this could have been the real world. Things could have happened in that way in the world. The technologies are great. When I look at the insides of the command module and the lunar module and the insides of mission control on Earth, all of those places looked very real. It looked like we were getting a real glimpse into a different world. Some of the character stuff we'll get into, but in terms of the technology and the science side, it felt very grounded. And I think that science grounding did continue. They make some technological leaps that I have some issues with, but I think certainly in terms of the science and the look and feel of the show and the sheer reality of what the moon looks like and of how all of these bits of clunky space hardware work, I think that they did an extremely good job with.
So I also want to ask you, Alan, because since you spent a whole career, looking at, the stars and space and what's going on there, strictly from the mathematics, because it's calculus plus that I just cannot wrap my head around. Did you think that, to the degree that you understand it, were they really spot on, or was it sort of like, well, it was kind of close-ish? How real was it?
No, I think so. I think it's actually very close. I think the orbital mechanics is complicated and counterintuitive, but there are some times in the show where they have things going into a lower orbit to speed up to catch with something else that's in a higher orbit. All of that is true to life. All of that is how orbital mechanics works. And I don't think they fuzzed any of that. I think that was actually, I think they did that extremely well. And they also did a very good job of explaining it to the audience. One of the things I like about the show is that there are some science fiction shows where astronauts just don't talk like astronauts. Real astronauts don't talk like that, guys. But in this show, they got the feeling of how people talk, the feeling of how people talk to each other in mission control, or when they're in a spacecraft, and the back and forth. All of that I thought was very true to life as well. So I think in terms of the physics and in terms of the character interactions on the technical level, all of that did ring very true to me, and I thought they did a fabulous and very believable job of that.
So Randee, what about you? So I guess my question would be, as a semi follow-up, had the science, the technology, the grittiness of it felt as real as it did, do you think that the show would have been able to advance the way it did, or would they have lost us too early? Like, what do you think?
I think you do have to place the audience in a place that feels real initially in order to launch off of it. Otherwise, it just feels like fantasy. I mean, for starting, yes, you can do a space program on a different planet, but that would feel very different than what we have here. And I think by inserting, for example, Werner von Braun and the console area, the mission control that looked very realistic, like things we may have seen before of actual mission controls. Yeah, I think it makes you buy in as the audience. You show up, you see this stuff all looks real, and you're not going in the same direction that history has told us we went in. But but I do believe that all of this stuff, even if you don't understand what the science is, I want that science to be as accurate as possible. And I just trusted immediately that they knew what they were doing, even if I didn't personally understand that.
Yeah, I mean, Alan,
Yeah.
I like what you had said about how the astronauts, they spoke like astronauts, like they weren't being, Buck Rogersy, blam blam, hit the phasers and all that kind of stuff. It was really, all the, they had to understand. I like the fact that the astronauts themselves had this technical expertise. They weren't just, they weren't just hot shot pilots who pressed buttons. Like they were technicians in their own way. They had to understand it, or what happens if things go wrong? You have to know how to adjust in real time. Right. I thought that was great.
Yeah, and you can actually see them adjusting. You can actually see the actors, they're like thinking sometimes before they throw the switches. They're not just like, the hands aren't moving everywhere. They're being very precise about what they're doing, so they don't screw up,
And I think that lets us buy in then for later on, when things are more hand wavy. I mean, they're still based in science, but they're still more theoretical. And the other thing I have very much liked, and I know we'll get into this, is as they have explored further in space and we've gotten more away from what an actual program that exists, you see where the weaknesses of all this are, about what it means to be long-term in space.
Right. For sure. And that's a great point, which I want to bring up later. So JL kind of touched on this early, and we're going to spend a nice amount of time here. So one element of For All Mankind that I think makes it shine the way it does is that the characters are so well defined and fleshed out. So rather than us taking a linear season by season look, I want to let's explore the show for a while through the eyes of the characters. And to start, let's talk about some of the women who dared to travel among the stars, right? So in particular, we had Molly Cobb, Ellen Wilson, Tracy Stevens, Danielle Poole. JL, you sort of touched on this first. So dealer's choice, pick one of those four that you want to talk about.
I can't decide whether I want to grow up to be Danny Poole or Molly Cobb. So I absolutely adore Molly Cobb. She's, the character that I wish that I'd had when I was younger growing up. And like, I went to space camp 3 times. I was going to be an astronaut before I realized that like math is hard. But maybe if I'd had Danny Poole and Molly Cobb, I might have stuck with it a little bit longer. And I love Tracy because Tracy was a great counterpoint in terms of not having to be because she was a woman, be better than all of the guys. She was at her core, like not that much different than Ed and her husband in terms of she was a pilot and that's what she did.
Yeah, but go back for a second. But Molly Cobb, so what I want to let's not sort of gloss over, oh, I love so-and-so. Tell me why. So let's go back to Molly. What specifically about, because Molly was great, but I want to hear what appealed to you about Molly.
her give no F's attitude. She was like, I'm here to do a job. And like, I know that she and all the other women were like, well, okay, we're here because America just wants to beat Russia at something, but they didn't let that frame the way that they worked the job and did the job and pushed their limits. And they were going to get into space because that's what they wanted to do, not just as tokens that their country could wave around.
So, I think we see often in a lot of genre fiction, whether it's books, movies, TVs, the big heroic act, the sacrificial act is usually done by the strapping, the guy is the hero. But Molly Cobb, she ran out into a radiation-filled atmosphere and paid a very severe price for this. I mean, she did the daring duo, right? She was out there risking life and limb. And Tracy Stevens and Gordo, I mean, talk about that for a second. I mean, I thought the ending, I mean, personally, I thought season 2 was just one of the greatest seasons of any show I've ever seen. But boy, the two of them out there, I mean, they taped themselves up basically like with duct tape and ran out onto the surface of the planet. I mean, to literally save everyone's lives. Holy cow. And considering where Tracy started, right? You're just the cover girl. You're just the pretty face. No, like, no. Give me a little, Randee, give me some more.
I can talk about individual characters, and I'm happy to do that. I do want to mention really quick about the thing that fascinates me about the show almost above anything else is the idea that if you change the one thing, i.e. the Russians get to the moon first, everything else that happens on the show follows, which means that the idea that NASA has real competition, that the national ego is on the line, all of a sudden what that becomes is women have more of a place. Eventually, LGBTQ people have a place. It's a really radical notion when you look at it that way, because it asserts that what we have now could have, all this diversity that we have now, we're still talking about, like, we could have had it earlier if we felt that there was competition out there. And because there wasn't competition, we sort of went up there and we planted our flag and we said, cool. And then we didn't go back. Now, I know things are changing now, but that to me is one of the most radical things about this TV show. And then by giving us not just a token character or even a token and another character, it becomes this women are at least 50%, if not more so, of the whole show and the reason the show works, which again makes this show very subversive in a lot of ways. It's a science-y show, it's a spacey show. This is not a space where women often have a place. And I love that, for example, Karen Baldwin starts as, the house.
We're getting to, for right now, just for right now, stick to the astronauts. Stick to the astronauts.
I apologize. Well, so Tracy is kind of my hero. Like, yes, she starts off as the cover gal, but then ends up saving Mars. I'm sorry, saving the moon. So yeah, everything that JL had said about her, I would 100% back up on.
And then
she's terrific.
Yeah. And then you have Tracy and Molly's heroic actions, rushing into the radiation field and everything. Whereas I would argue that Danny kind of low-key, like, not following orders to make the handshake in space happen is just as heroic.
What a moment that was.
Yeah, and arguably like saves prevents nuclear war. So that moment, saved a hell of a lot more lives than what Molly or Tracy did.
Oh, 100%. Right. I mean, Danielle Poole can lead my team any day. Right? Alan, so what about you? Talk to me about the women, the astronauts.
Okay, yes, and I would say too that for me, Danielle Poole was a bit more believable as a female astronaut all the way through. But they all are. They all have credibility. They're all their competence shines out of all of them. When they're in space, you can just You can just tell that they're in their element at that point. They're doing the thing they've been trained for. They've been doing it well. They do have their moments of heroism. They all do, in fact. They all have their moments of daring do and heroism. Like when Ellen launches herself out of the spacecraft at the end to go and grab the fuel tank. I mean, the whole setup for that is a little hokey, but the point is that she actually does have that heroic moment. She does have those moments in space, and all four of them do. And the other women that come along later on. So I think that part of the show is awesome. I think it's great the way the women evolve, the way all of the women in the show, and I know you're going to get to this, but all of the women in the show evolve in their own attitudes as well, and in their own relationships with each other and with the other men. And a lot of that does feel very genuine and very realistic to me.
Right. And let's not overlook one of the big ones here. Ellen Wilson, who at the time, remember, so we're talking about in this alternate history, had to be, have a fake marriage, had to cover up her gender identity, had to cover up her passionate relationship. She became president of the United States.
Yeah.
And then she outed herself
Yeah.
live while she was president. Wow. I mean,
this is the radical stuff I'm talking about too. Like we get, not only you get a female president, which we don't have yet, we get our first gay president as well that we know of. And like, it's it just amazes me that they went in that direction as opposed to just sort of following what may have been a very small ripple. They made it a big ripple.
Absolutely. And, I mean, at least to me, you guys may or may not feel differently, but to me, in each one of those four characters, everything that they got was earned, right? As from a character standpoint, right? It's not like
Absolutely.
they had one episode or, a scene where they had to struggle and then everything worked out. I mean, they had to fight and fight and fight.
And they never stopped fighting.
No, and they never did. It was just one obstacle after another. So everything that they achieved to me just felt so earned. And that's, to me, that's critical. So moving on. So there were other critically important female characters who are on the other side of the team. Let's start with Karen. So she starts off in season 1 as being this hyper intense, anxiety-riddled control freak who almost to the point where it was almost hard to watch her sometimes, but she ends up taking such a fascinating and ultimately tragic journey. Talk to me a little bit about the evolution of Karen. So JL, start us off.
She's a really good representation of a military spouse whose husband has a really, really dangerous job. I actually I almost kind of forgot about her anxiety because I probably related to it so well. And her evolution from going to just that is my identity as I'm an astronaut's wife to everything that she ends up doing.
And also, let's not forget, she also lost a child.
She did.
Tragically.
Yeah. I mean, and I liked the fact that she, like all of the other women, she's not perfect either. She also made some questionable life choices. But I still loved her, and she still, definitely made her mark in that world.
Well, let's kind of get into I want to go into the depth of a little bit. So she starts off, right, as essentially this military wife, very nervous. She's in basically a constant state of panic. And she goes from this to she buys a bar, which to her was like this big radical change. And she flips, and then she winds up becoming a partner in the biggest private space program that America has ever seen. Mm-hmm. So Alan, keep it going. Talk to me about Karen's evolution.
Yeah, Karen's evolution is great because, like you say, when you first see her, for example, she's very much against the idea of women coming into the space program at the time because they're like, who are they to come in and do the things that you've been training for years? Why is this happening? So she was one of the characters who was sort of against the introduction of women into the military. But even at that time, she was still a strong character because there's these scenes where Patty Doyle dies and Ed is like breaking up the house. He's like torn the phone off the wall. He's thrown it on the ground. And she's like, and she calms him down. She's like, Ed, go and mow the lawn. And he does. They have this actually really good relationship in a lot of ways. She bosses him around and he takes and he's like, okay, fine, whatever. And so she's strong from the beginning, but her strength is in a very kind of traditional way. And then later on, as you say, with the bar, and then later on when she's working in seasons 3 and 4, or season 3, in the space program itself, and she comes to be working with Helios and all of that. That is quite an evolution, but you have to obviously realize that 10 years passes between each of the shows.
Right.
So there's a lot of time for a lot of character development to happen behind the scenes with all of these people. So no, I loved it. I loved Karen's character, and I was sad when I was sad at Karen's demise.
And she got as a heroic and astronaut death as
yes,
Tracy
right.
or Molly did. So
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
I mean, what an ultimate, I mean, it's a big moment. Maybe, was it the most plausible moment? Maybe yes, maybe no, but just the fact that they went, it's go big or go home, and they went big. And
the theme of this entire show is go big or go home, which I
that's
appreciated. Even as like I'd be watching it and I'd be like, oh no, they're gonna do this super tropey, ridiculous decision. And my husband's like, how do you know? And I'm like, because this is basically a space or soap opera at this point, and I love it.
I mean, what I thought was actually, this is just points to my own personality, but when she started, what started to change her, ironically, she started to smoke some weed.
Yeah.
Right? That was like the beginning. It was sort of symbolic of her shift, like in
with Molly's husband.
Right?
With Wayne. Yeah.
Oh God, which I thought was great. So all right. So of course, we can't discuss For All Mankind without talking about Almeida and the incomparable Margot Madison. So let's talk about the dynamic between the two of them, and then the very complex storyline and decisions that really they both make, and the repercussions of those decisions. So Randee, why don't you start us off with Margot and Almeida?
Yeah, I mean, Margot's one of the great characters of the story, certainly. I don't know if we're going to get to see her again after this particular season. But yeah, she's really interesting, and she has been forced to do things that she didn't want to do. And at the same time, she didn't make excuses at the same time. Alita, I think when you have the strong characters on this show like Margot, they're ones that make decisions and it makes sense with their personality, as opposed to feeling like a piece on the chessboard.
Yes.
And there are characters on this show who are often, I have feel that way. I mean, I know that this is kind of we're definitely cheering the whole show, but that doesn't mean it's a flawless show. And I know we've moved on, but I was going to say at some point about Karen that some of the decisions they had her do, she felt very much like a chess piece the further we got into her story. I didn't buy some of the things that they put her into.
For example,
running the hotel in space. That made no sense. And if you notice, they completely abandoned that idea right after, the disaster. Some of the stuff they had her do didn't really jive with yes, I can run a bar. You mean I can run a hotel in space? That didn't work for me. Margot, on the other hand, when she's faced with a problem, she has that sort of very focused, almost spectrum-y approach to it, that she will hone in on it and try to find the solution no matter what happens. And Alita and her really do pair up evenly on that. It's just Alita is younger and more idealistic in a lot of ways, and is very much like, okay, my answer, it doesn't matter if I bring people down, I have to get this answer. And Margot is kind of like that, but Margot is older and can see the gray areas, and that's how she ends up where she is. So I've enjoyed the way that Margot developed, and I'm sort of sorry we're not going to get to see her, because I think she's kind of been in along with Ed, she's been one of the anchor people in the show the entire run.
So Margot ends up, making some very questionable choices. JL, so what do you think? Did, on the one hand, being in the situation that she's in, first she sort of, she has this, let's say, emotional affair with Sergei, and and she feels very drawn to them, and there's a kinship amongst they love the physics of it, they love the science, they love their exploration, but in reality, they're crossing some very big no lines here all along the way, and then obviously it escalates. What do you think, especially as she kind of became a pawn in a very dangerous global political game here? Do you think that her she justified her decisions, but do you justify her decisions?
Well, like Randee, you contrasted Margot and Aleda, saying that Aleda was more idealistic, but I would argue that Margot was idealistic in her same way too, because where she started to veer off into quote unquote traitor territory, she was doing that for the right reason in terms of identifying problems, and knowing that, oh crap, Russia stole this from us, and then we find a problem in it, and now if Russia uses this, bad stuff's going to happen to them. So what starts from good intentions just ends up dragging her deeper and deeper down. And the relationship she has with Sergei is almost like a byproduct of that. I feel like they almost like they did that to humanize her more than they really needed to, because it is so difficult to portray a female character like that, without having her basically just be compared and criticized and unfeeling. So while I liked the Sergei stuff, when the first time we meet him and that happens, I hated when they brought him back in season 4 and he all of a sudden like just walked away from his witness protection life and his wife and tried to get back with Margot, and that annoyed the hell out of me.
Yeah, I kept on saying toward the end of season 4, it's like, you have a wife.
I know, I was yelling that the
She
whole
doesn't
time
know
too.
you went anywhere. Like, we actually saw him with the wife. And just to clarify what I meant about Aleda and Margot, Aleda is at a different stage in her life.
Yes,
I think when we are
absolutely.
in our 20s or even our 30s, you have a different perspective on what idealism means. And by the time that she's at an age where she can investigate Margot is older. Margot's at least 50, 60 at this point. And she's got a better idea of why the shades of gray happened, because she doesn't tell anybody about why she handed over the information, right? Like, she just disappears. Aleda finds out about it, she disappears, and we never know until season 4. Aleda never finds out why she gave that information away. She just thinks that she's this traitor. But we know that there's more subtle to it.
We're so far, like Margot goes so far down the rabbit hole, but you kind of have to contrast it to the moments in season 1 when she learns that, about Operation Paperclip and former Nazis being given work in the US.
Yeah.
And,
Right,
and the
because
problem,
she's young at that time. She's Aleda at that time.
yep.
That was actually going to be my next point, is that, at the early Margot, in a way, was not so dissimilar from a younger Aleda, right?
Yep.
Right, yes. And the Margot-Aleda relationship kind of mirrors the Von Braun-Margot relationship originally. And they both end up kind of similarly with like betrayal and disillusionment and all of those things. But I do love Margot. I do love the grayness of her character. I kind of love the way she sleeps in her office, showers at work, packs up the bed, opens the door, and she's at work.
Yep.
But the moral grayness, he started even earlier than that, when she blackmailed Weisner to become a flight director. But then the grayness there is, should she have had that job anyway? Should they have given that to her anyway? Is she only getting what she deserves the only way she can? So she's been a morally gray character all the way through. And I actually, with some of the reservations that the others who have said, I do love that about her, that she's feeling her way forward here and trying to do the right thing, bringing the asteroid in at the end, all of that kind of stuff. She's a very interesting character.
All right, so let's shift our attentions to Ed Baldwin. Oh, Ed. So for the start of the series, despite his anger, his selfishness, and his depression, he felt very much like the hero of the series, or one of them anyway. And then, as he got older and suffered several very real and personal tragedies, he started to become increasingly reckless and unreliable, and arguably, maybe a villain on the show, depending on your point of view.
The further we got along in season 4, I turned to my husband and I said, Ed Baldwin's story is, if you don't die the hero, you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Very good. Yeah, I kept on turning to my husband and saying, why is he still here? Towards that season, because I'm just like, why has he not gone home yet? Why is he not, why is he still a player?
They do frame him and give like the flashbacks to their early time on Mars does end up giving credence to why he has then become Old Man Mars. But I was with you in terms of like, you're just messing stuff up now, man. You need to go home.
There was
I don't know how much of a reference this is, but as you were talking about it just now, I kept thinking, is how much of a metaphor is this of like the old white guys who won't let go of the reins of power?
Yes.
I don't think that's a subtle metaphor.
No.
I think that's spot
No.
on. That's spot on. I mean, in that sense, I mean, you could argue that Ed, the character, maybe he jumped the shark and he hung on too long, but then again, doesn't that seem to mirror life as we know it? Right. All right. So quick interlude for folks who came in a little late. If you have any questions or comments for the panel, put them in the chat box and we'll get to a few at the end. All right. So, oh God, there's so much I want to get to, but we can only get to what we can get to. All right. So Helios is a significant player in the expansion of space exploration, almost a reflection of where SpaceX could even be headed. Talk to me about the battles between the government and private space programs and how their agendas merge and diverge. So Alan, let's start with you.
Okay, so at the beginning of season 3, we have this space hotel, which I thought was a big leap forward in technology that wasn't really, that I started to lose a bit of luck at that point because I wasn't sure that kind of technology would have been available about it. But that's not really your question. The question is about like the private and public sides of space. And I can clearly see like the competition between those two sides. We can see that in our own world. Some parts of that seem realistic. It may not be unrealistic to imagine that there will be a battle to see which sector gets to Mars first. But one of the things about the private sector right now is that it's very much funded by the public sector. A lot of SpaceX's money comes originally from NASA and so forth. So it's actually a very complex relationship. It's not just like two sides that don't really speak to each other. It's much more of an interweaving of capabilities and so on. So, and I don't think that interweaving was necessarily shown well on the show.
So
it's set up to be very nice TV in terms of how it all lined up so perfectly for them to race to Mars, whereas in the real world, the odds of that happening are astronomical, and that's the sort of thing that you would really only get in television.
Yeah.
Right. Okay,
Yeah,
so,
I'm glad that they had it in there, though. I'm glad
fun.
it
It was
didn't
great,
just stick
but
on the one note of Russia or Soviet Union versus the U.S. Throwing corporate not corporate America, but just corporations in the middle of all that, and how they would be this spoiler or this independent or this third party. What is interesting to me is that makes you then start wondering, is this guy, are we heading in the direction of Star Trek, or are we heading in the direction of Weyland-Yutani? And I feel like the show leaves that open because it seems as though often the corporation gets what it wants just by being that third party spoiler.
And they do have that flexibility. You can see that the private sector has this flexibility to jump back and forth, and that part is very realistic, of course. They can turn on a dime in a way that NASA and the federal government can't usually.
And then where it gets extrapolated even more, like hits you over the head with it in season 4 when you have the Helios guys doing all the grunt work living underground, and then the NASA scientists, getting the nicer canteen.
It was a real upstairs downstairs kind of a set. Yes.
Mm.
Right. So as the series progressed, and we've been sort of alluding to this a bit, it's morphed somewhat really from an alternate history really to more of like a sci-fi thriller, popcorn kind of show. How do you feel about the shift in the tone from the earlier seasons as it's gone forward? Yes, no, maybe?
Well,
what's your
we've
feeling?
obviously been spinning. You have to spin further and further away, right? Because we just don't have what they have on the moon, much less Mars. But without wanting to say anything definitive, because of course things change over the years, after about the second season, I got to have a chat with the executive producer, Ronald Moore. And
Wow.
I asked him the question that I was dying to ask basically from the beginning. He was a producer on Star Trek, right? He worked on Next Generation. And I said, and of course, Battlestar Galactica as well. But I remember saying to him, look, do you see this show as, if not literally heading in the direction, but do you see it as being sort of the in-between between now and how we get to Star Trek? And he actually said yes. And that has kind of put a different sheen on a lot of the show for me in terms of, now this show is never going to meet up with that. It's not like, oh, we're going to merge these two universes. But I think that that's one of the roles that he sees this show as being, as how we got to the actual more utopian, more fantastical Star Trek.
Well, you're prescient because you actually are leading into my very next question. So I'm gonna jump ahead and just dive into it.
Okay.
So
Can I say
Ronald,
one thing though?
of course, please.
I actually really appreciated that they almost leaned into the thriller-esque ridiculousness, because if they'd only done it a little bit, it would have been jarring. But because they consistently did stuff that was so close to being like completely implausible, but like you're watching and you're gonna suspend your disbelief just enough to watch Kelly get launched, pregnant Kelly get launched off of Mars on the back of, with nothing other than a spacesuit. Like, they did it enough that it's like jumping the shark but never actually landing. So it still just keeps working. As long as you don't land, it's just going to keep working.
Right.
All right. So following on this, Randee, you jumped ahead of me. So
Sorry.
my question was, Ronald D. Moore, who created the BSG reboot and was influential on Next Generation and DS9, has said that he sees For All Mankind as sort of being driven by some of the ideals of Star Trek. Yet, to me, if I hadn't known any better, I would swear that For All Mankind is almost a direct prequel to The Expanse.
Yes. Yes.
What do you think? Right?
Yeah, it felt more like that in season 4, certainly. I mean, the idea that you're going to focus on the equivalent of the Belters for, all the downstairs people who are working. I was astounded how much effort they put into that part of the show. I mean, it all does tie together. But it was interesting to me that, yes, I exactly see what you're saying about the Expanse thing, because we're getting
beyond that, if you really break it down, if you just think about it, right, what the Expanse is, like when we are introduced it, right, you've got Earth on one side, Mars on the other, the belt in between, the Belters feeling oppressed, right? So the miners are doing all the work and they're getting none of the spoils while the rich people get everything, right? Which is leading up exactly where we are in this season. And in the Expanse, what do? Not only do they mine these asteroids for precious fuels, they steal one. They actually steal them. I mean, this is not even like sort of the same. It's in some ways, it's exactly specifically the same. I don't know.
I mean, you'll never get me to like Miles's character, even if you like give him the Belter patois and like
right.
tattoos on him. I'm still gonna hate him and be so bored by everything related to him. But like that almost gets me.
All right, so one more. I want to go. So the Goldilocks asteroid, it's the big prize in season 4, and likely it'll have effects into season 5 and beyond. So while the US and Russia both claimed to have the best interests of all mankind at heart, there were others who were convinced that once again, powerful nations would claim the spoils for themselves and then sharing the scraps with everyone else. Whether or not you agreed with Dev and Ed's plan to steal the asteroid or their justifications for it, do you think, at least on some level, they had a point? Alan?
Yes, I think they had a point. I think it's very clear. It's very easy to see things from their point of view. From Ed's point of view, where he's like, he's essentially saying, I'm a Martian now. Mars should have these things. This is how we move forward into the universe, and Dev wanting to exploit it for his own rights. But I think basically they are correct. And the other two, the two, like Margot and Elena, who eventually come around to that point of view, I think that is actually a pretty strong argument for keeping it around Mars and for developing things off into the future instead of letting Earth corporations take over and take things forward into the future. And clearly we are going to be going into asteroid mining territory, because the last thing we saw at the end of season 4 was this station, Kuznetsov station, named after the Russian who died. And once again, in a 10-year period of time, we now have these huge buildings on the asteroid and clearly a large mining thing. So God knows where they'll be another 10 years from now. But the things are moving thick and fast, and that's
JL?
where they're going.
No, go ahead, Randee.
I was just going to say,
Okay.
I get what Alan is saying about Dev and Ed, becoming Martians. I just wish that it had been what felt like more of something that came out of their own personalities. Dev feels very self-serving no matter what happens. He just wants to get away from Earth, so he becomes a Martian.
Right.
Ed, on the other hand, is just pissed because he's not allowed to run roughshod over the entire station and doesn't want to listen to any superior officers anymore.
Yeah,
And
he's throwing
how
a
dare
he's
you
throwing a
question
tantrum.
me? And he becomes a Martian out of a tantrum. Like, I would have liked at least one of our main players who decides that they want to be a Martian to actually do it for less selfish reasons, for less, you
Have
know,
such
Maybe,
high
but he
hopes
always
for
was,
Kelly
right? I mean,
Baldwin. Kelly Baldwin in season 5 is going to be the first like true Martian.
well, her
Yeah.
son.
Okay.
But it's
Well,
actually
his son
true.
already is, but in terms of somebody like becoming like feeling that Mars is now their home for genuine reasons as opposed to
I buy that.
reactionary or self-serving reasons, I think
Yes.
because her storyline once she got to Mars kind of fell off a little bit. So I really hope that they were basically just like, oh, we have to get her to Mars at some point this season so that we can do something bigger and better with her creepy robots and finding life later.
But I think Ed actually does have this, he does have that motivation as well, because even back in season 1, there's this point where he's sitting down and talking about going back into the armed forces. And the officer he's talking to says, you always did have a habit of pissing off your superior officers. That's kind of a key to his character. I think there is an idealistic side of Ed. There's also this kind of ornery side where he does want to piss off authority.
Yes.
And those two things merge, I think, in his storylines all the way through. When he's on the moon, when he's at Jamestown base, there's a point where he really doesn't want to leave. And he's now reached that point on Mars as well. But I think there's an idealism underneath it all, in addition to just the cranky old man not wanting to let go of his toys.
I mean, if you think about it, ultimately, I mean, only a handful of people, right? So Dev and Ed particularly, and then ultimately like Margot and Aleda, only a handful of people changed the course of human history.
There you go. Yeah.
And they stole the decision-making power away from the powers that be. Now, whether it was the right thing or the wrong, good or bad, better or worse, I don't know. But that was pretty ballsy of it. But okay, that was great. But now it's a time on the show where we spin the wheel. On the wheel of 7 possible categories I created especially for this panel. Wherever it lands is what you get. And the categories are The Next Generation, Enemy of the State, I Am Rocket Man, My Alt History, No Pain, No Gain, I've Seen You Before, and Kick Him in the Junk. All right, JL, you're up first. You ready?
Yikes.
All right, what do we got for you?
Round and round.
All right, I Am Rocket Man. What is this? Good news. Okay, if you were given the opportunity right now, today, to be a civilian passenger on a space flight to the moon or Mars with the intention of returning, would you do it?
I applied to the I Am Moon project, so absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Like I'm way ahead of you.
Easy question.
I went to space camp. I would go tomorrow if you said let's go.
Okay, good for you, because there's no way I would ever do it. Okay.
I absolutely would.
Alan, you're up next. You ready?
Bohica.
All right, what do we got for you? And we got the next generation. Okay, let's say we advanced the space program to the point where we were starting to colonize the moon and Mars. Would you consider either of those far-reaching destinations for future generations, or are those hostile environments simply too limiting to be considered for a future thriving colony?
I would absolutely consider them for future generations. We have to go forward. We have to colonize them. I think we will eventually, and obviously not as fast as in the For All Mankind universe, but I think we have to do that. To get on the soapbox, I think it's our destiny, and we should absolutely do it. And I would go as well.
All right, Randee, you're up next.
Okay.
All right,
Big money, big money, big money.
Come on, no whammies. What do we got for you? All right, Enemy of the State. Okay. Ooh, all right. So we learned late in season 1 that Werner von Braun was actually a German scientist who had helped design rocket attacks against England and other countries. He was part of the Nazi Party. So let me ask, given his role in Hitler's crusade, would you still have enlisted his expertise to advance the U.S. space program, or is that just one step too far?
I don't know. I mean, as potentially the only Jew in the room, I might want to defer. Okay.
No, you're not.
You know, I don't think I can answer this in any really creative way other than I probably would not have. Okay, but for realism's sake, you know, in a totally practical way, if you don't take him on, somebody else will, like the Russians, who then maybe end up on the moon first. You know, it's
which happened anyway.
Which happened anyway in this case. But what I'm saying is that, like, you can make the argument that in a purely practical way, somebody had to grab him. and I do not know when he came to the US, like exactly what year, but there was a certain amount of deniability about just how awful and the Nazis were for a while. So like, you know, I think practically it made sense to have him, but you know, with my own particular cultural background, it really would be really, really hard for me to get fully on board with that.
I'm with you, sister. All right. So now it's time where we're going to pick your poison. I've got 3 choices for you, A, B, or C. I'm not going to tell you what's behind each, but I will say they're all connected to tonight's theme. So which do you pick, A, B, or C? All right, Randee, we'll keep it going with you.
C.
C. All right. C is alt history spoils. Oh boy. So this is a new one. First time this has ever been on the show. So we'll see how we do. I'm going to give you 2 alt history scenarios, and you can only choose one. All right, you ready?
Mhm.
Choice number 1. You can pick one key narrative from our actual history from any point within your own lifetime and rewrite the narrative to your liking. But you personally do not get to enjoy the spoils yourself, and no one will ever know what you did.
Okay.
Choice number 2. You get to be a part of this change. Everyone knows what you did, but you personally suffer tremendous losses as a result that would likely ruin the rest of your life, but everyone else gets the spoils. Which alt life do you pick?
Read me the first one more time.
So you can pick any key narrative that existed within from our actual history from within your lifetime and rewrite the narrative to your liking.
Right.
But you personally do not get to enjoy the spoils yourself, and no one will ever know what you did to make their lives better.
Okay, I would pick that one, except that the narrative that I would pick would have to impact my life on some level because I am a citizen of the world, or you know, I live in this world. So like, I don't know if the 2 of them can match up, but I would pick that one.
Okay.
Am I supposed to tell you what the narrative is that I would change?
Only if you want to.
Yeah, I think I would change. Let's just broadly say I would change some political election outcomes. And you can decide how far back I would go with that. But yes, I would definitely change some political national election outcomes, from which I would benefit just by having less stress in my life.
Okay, fair enough. All right, Alan. So you got A or B?
A for Alan.
All right. So we're going to give you some truth serum. I got 10 questions for you. You ready? Okay. In order you enjoyed them, rank the seasons of For All Mankind.
2, 1, 3.
2, 1, 3, 4. Okay.
4, yeah.
All right. I'm with you. Favorite astronaut in the series?
Daniel Poole.
All right. Favorite moment in the series where a real person from our history had a different trajectory in the show?
It's very short. It goes by very quickly, but John Lennon surviving.
Oh, yes. That's a good one. I love that moment. All right. Character from our history who has not been represented in the series so far, but you'd still like to see show up.
Phew. What year are we at? 2003. We've had Al Gore. Barack Obama.
Okay. Character from All Mankind you wished which had gotten a longer or more compelling storyline.
Gosh. I don't know. I'm trying to think who died in the first series. Would have been fun to have another female astronaut, so maybe Patty Doyle.
Okay.
I'll go with that one.
So Margot and Sergei went out with a burger. If you knew that you and the person you love most were about to face your last moments, what would be your final meal?
It would not be a burger. I know that Margot loves her junk food and her Twinkies or whatever those. They're not Twinkies. They're little, I don't know, the little sweets she keeps eating.
Okay.
Anyway, my last meal, I guess it would be at a really good French restaurant.
Okay. Which characters did they age up best and which maybe don't look quite right?
Danielle looks good. I think the hair and beard on Ed don't look so great.
Oh, I thought they looked ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's hard to make hot look bad. Come on.
Yeah, I was really hoping he would shave. I'm like, please get that thing off your face.
He was not looking good. All right. So Gordo, Ed, and Danielle barely kept their sanity watching reruns of the Bob Newhart show. If you were in isolation on a lunar base for months on end with only one TV show to keep you company, knowing you'd have to watch it endlessly on repeats, what would it be?
And show that I could watch endlessly on repeats. See, I don't watch a lot of shows in repeats. God, that's a really hard one. Weirdly, that's the hardest question you've asked me so far. Buffy? Maybe Buffy the Vampire Slayer, just because it's fun.
Okay. All right. So if you were living up on Mars and knew Miles could smuggle one creature comfort from home up to you, what would you pick?
Tempted to be crass and say vodka, but
nothing wrong with saying vodka.
I'll say vodka. No,
all right.
that's it.
All right. Last one. If you could have been part of the For All Mankind ecosystem and you could befriend one character, who would you choose?
Probably Ellen. I think she and I are the most similar in some basic personality ways.
Okay, fair enough. All right. So JL, so we got the last one for you. So which is the writer's room. When it comes to alternate history, what are some rules of the road you suggest to the authors out there who tackle these kinds of narratives?
I have an entire presentation about this.
How long do you
We
have? She could do this for hours.
So it all boils down to world building. And so you always have to remember who ends up with the power and then who ends up with the money, and why those might not necessarily be the same thing and how that would impact. So one thing that I did really like about For All Mankind was that even though they simplified it way down, they did broaden it beyond just US versus Soviet Union by introducing Helios.
Okay, very good. All right, so we've got I'm going to take some questions if there are any in the chat. I don't see any here. So what we're going to do is just give me a minute. I'm going to share my screen. And I'm going to share some goodies for everybody. So just bear with me for a minute. Okay, so Randee, what do we got here? What are we looking at?
You're looking at the cover of my book, Tune In Tomorrow, about a reality TV show run by mythical creatures, for mythical creatures, but starring humans. And as an entertainment journalist, I have put a lot of how the sausage gets made in the background and everything. And it's goofy and it's full of puns. And yeah, if you like that kind of thing, that is the book for you.
All right, great. I got it. Next time I see you, I want you to sign a copy for me. All right. So JL, what do we got?
So speaking of alternate history, this is the first spin-off to my Steel Empire series that takes place in a world where, like I said, alternate history is a storytelling method, so it can really be any genre. So this is a paranormal romance set in a very urban fantasy world where the alternate history premise is that if supernatural creatures existed and everybody has always known about them, what would our world look like?
All right, very good.
Very cool cover.
Okay,
so this is gorgeous.
All right, so how many books you're planning in the series?
So the 7th book in the first series comes out in April, and this is the first book in a spinoff that is so far going to be 4.
All right, right on. All right, folks. So if you want something magical and cool and alt, here it is for you. All right, Alan, talk to me. God, I love this cover.
Okay, so this is Hot Moon. This is my love letter to the Apollo program. It's my alternate Apollo novel set entirely on and around the moon, beginning in 1979, written completely independently from All Mankind. I'd finished it before the first episode aired. It's my techno-thriller with heart. So naval aviator and career astronaut Vivian Carter, commander of Apollo 32, docks with NASA's Columbia station en route to the moon, but she's caught in the crossfire as 4 Soviet Soyuz craft appear to assault the orbiting station. So a mission gets scrubbed. She gets redirected to Hadley Base, which is a scientific outpost with a crew of 18. But soon Hadley too will come under Soviet attack, forcing its unarmed astronauts into daring acts of ingenuity and improvisation. So lots of moon action, intrigue, espionage, lots of character stuff. If you like For All Mankind, you'll maybe like this too.
All right, right on. It's great stuff. All right, folks. And as for me, Since we're talking about alt history and sci-fi thrillers, I'll encourage you to check out Crossline. So Crossline posits in an alternate Earth reality, and a modern day space pilot is testing out warp thrusters. And if they work, they're going to revolutionize space travel as we know it. But for reasons I will not explain, our pilot is forced into a wormhole and ends up on another alternate Earth, which is divided into two. There's only two factions left, kind of more out in what is their version of the Grand Canyon and probably their version of what is left of New York City. And Marcus Powell has landed in a pivotal point, and turns out that he may actually have been destined to be there all along. But yet back on our original Earth, alt Earth, Powell's wife and young daughter do not trust the powers that be in the private space program that launched him, and they are racing frantically to infiltrate Tower Command to bring him home before they very realistically think it's going to be too late. So it's a little bit Interstellar, it's a little bit Buck Rogers, it's a little bit
Farscape.
And a little bit, that's exactly a little bit Farscape with a little touch of Escape from New York. So if you like so this one's a little bit more science fantasy than science, but there's definitely some hard science in here. If you like all those alternate Earth elements combined, I think you're going to have some fun. All right. So I want to thank my guests for coming on tonight and talking for all mankind. Thank you to Alan and to JL and to Randee. And I want to thank everyone at home who's watching. As always, be kind, be gentle, and generous of spirit. And for God's sakes, go read a book. Until then, we're off the air next week in honor of Valentine's Day. So I'll see you all in 2 weeks. Thanks, everyone. Hope you had a good time. Bye.
Thanks, Russ.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, guys. Okay, good to see you. All right.